Hi, I'm Terrell Turner, the host of the Law and Finance Show, and today we're interviewing a great guest with a tech business. And this is a very exciting one because one of the challenges that happens in the legal industry is, sometimes people need to find the right lawyer or a lawyer that can meet their need. But most people, they have no idea where to look. And also, lawyers are always looking for clients that they can actually help and solve problems. And sometimes there's not a clear way for that to happen as well. So I'm excited to talk about this business owner because he's coming up with a tech solution and they're seeing 100% month over month growth because people are finding their tool to be very, very useful. So you want to stay tuned for today's episode. So without further ado, welcome to the show, Zeb. How are you?
Hey, Terrell. Great. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. It is a pleasure to have you on. Now, I'm very excited to talk about, your business, and we'll definitely get into that because I think this is definitely a huge question for both consumers and service providers as well. And we'll definitely dive into that. But before we dive into that piece of it, tell us a little bit about kind of your background.
Yeah, and thank you so much for the opportunity. Zeb Anderson, lifelong coder, developer, nerd, wear that badge proudly. Was the D&D kid back in the day. I had a startup in around 2009. It was a coupon app that basically sent you a coupon based on your location. This was like 2 years after the iPhone came out, so everybody was like, why would I give you my location data? That's so creepy. Today it's like, here's my social, my firstborn kid, whatever, right? So a little early on that one. We had a small exit, and after that went to law school. It's my passion in life to kind of use conflict resolution plus technology together in a fun way that, to be honest, legal sucks at this today. So, excited to kind of push that forward a little bit. And to be honest, people like you bring the heat on that to the legal world, right? I think that's this technology and finance and how it all relates together in a more cohesive way for the legal industry as a whole is a beautiful thing. So I commend you for that. Honestly, after that, wanted to see what a startup looked like a little bit down the road. And student loans, if I'm honest, again. So went to work at Medtronic, which is a big health tech company. Started in compliance rather, did internal audit. And then my final role was leading the analytics practice for corporate strategy and channel management. And that's a long way of saying we were trying to go more direct in emerging markets. So basically from us to the hospital, as opposed to us through a couple distributors, they add, 10,000% markup and then to the hospital, right? And during that time, started thinking, what other industries kind of have that middleman problem? And legal is definitely one of them, right? So it's, us to, be at the mercy of a Google search, and then maybe, 3 or 4 that you find, you set up a call for next week. You don't know if you have to get charged or not for that call. It's a terrible process. So about 2.5 years ago, came up with LegalQ to kind of start solving for that. Had an awesome team of co-founders help the process along the way. And then was doing kind of the nights and weekends shift with Medtronic plus LegalQ. And then last summer, we got into the Techstarts accelerator. And then from there was able to jump ship and do it full time. And to your intro point, we've been growing pretty steadily since, and excited to keep moving with it.
Nice. It's quite the interesting journey. And, when you mentioned about, having the background of a coder and then going to law school, what was, that like? Was it an experience where you were in an environment where you had to think completely different from the world of coding, or was it very similar for you?
It's a good question. Well, so to start off, I was a political science history major undergrad because, to be honest, I was scared of Calc 52 or whatever you had to take for your CS degree. Like that just does not appeal to me. And I already knew a couple of languages to code in anyway, so I figured that could just get by with it. So the kind of the social sciences aspect of the law, I felt comfortable with, but there's a lot of pieces that were drastically different than kind of what I was expecting. And the Socratic method and just, the profs pointing at you and like you have to be on, get an answer. Like I'm terrible at that. So it was a process. But then there's some interesting aspects of law that's kind of similar to coding, right? So you have like a contract where it's like, I want this to be the end product, right? We want a relationship between this business and this property development. And here are the things that are important to us. In order to do that, you basically kind of build with the different clauses and aspects of the contract that over time is kind of the culmination of whatever that relationship is. And in some ways, coding is similar, right? Like you take a chunk of code to do your login screen or your security or your two-factor authentication, and it's just over time these little chunks of things that culminate to the overall product of what you're building. So that was kind of fun to see the corollaries between some of the aspects of law and code, but in other ways it was vastly different.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Awesome. So now, as you kind of took that first job, at what point in that kind of job did you really, or what triggered you to say, hey, you know what? I kind of want to see the startup world.
Yeah, that's another good question. I think it's always kind of just been a part of me. My dad had a failed tree farm business back in the day. He's a mailman. Like I grew up pretty poor, but he gave it a shot and saw it to that end that he could. And just I guess seeing the struggle, but also just the I don't know what it is, almost like a rebellious way of like looking at it. Like I don't have to work for the man and do this one role my entire career. I can make my own destiny with what I want to do with this. And I think just seeing the 90,000 person company, and to be honest, the culture at Medtronic was great. Like I don't have a lot to say bad about it, but it's just you're a cog in the or wheel or whatever, however that works. And you can have so much leverage to do well. And even if you have the best idea in the world, you can only move the needle so much. Whereas in a startup, literally every single day, for better or worse, like you're moving that needle, right? Every email is important. Every customer interaction is important. Every product piece that you add is vital to the growth of that company. And so I think just the scale of what you can do sooner it's kind of like a cheat code, right? It's like video game cheat where you can like level up instantly through this hack called a startup. And that's kind of what got me into it.
Nice, nice. So now, as you kind of traveled that journey, I mean, you talked about the Techstar. How did that really or hyper drive what you were working on? Like, what was it about that experience that really helped you kind of take things up a few notches?
Oh man, it levels you up so fast. Speaking of leveling up, like you just you have a company, right? And you have an idea and you have maybe some founders that you think can help you on that journey. And then you kind of just start with doing the things, right? And a lot of times that's very tactical, right? Like we have to put out this fire. We have to, put out this problem with the code, or like this customer's yelling at us for this thing. And it's hard to see the forest through the trees with that, right? It's hard to think strategically when every day is like, I got to get through these 20 emails first and then think strategically, right? Like that sucks. And so Techstarts does an awesome job of just refocusing you on what's important, right? And they do that through data. So an example is there was a weekly OKR KPI call where you literally put out here's our goals for the week with numbers on them, and here's why they're important. And at the end of the week, like, you get together in your cohort, and there was 10 companies total in our cohort. And by the way, all super supportive, loved each other. Like, truly there was no animosity like between us. But you still had to bring your A game, right? Because it's like, here's where we failed, here's where we did well. And, you just kind of show all your cards out there, and it just levels you up so much faster than you would otherwise do so if you're just kind of going through the motions of, let's try this thing this week, this, put out these fires. And I think with that, plus the network that you get from it is worth its weight in gold.
Nice. Now, when you went into the Techstars program, like how far along were you kind of in your, your kind of your tech stack or your tech journey, as far as where was the product in its life cycle?
Yeah, another good question. So, by the way, my kiddos are at home today, so if you hear some in the background, that's what you're hearing. I try to pacify with some some Disney Plus, but we'll see. We were pretty far along in the product. So we were about a year and a half into it, I would say, at that point. And so we had some assumptions baked into the product. They were wrong, a lot of them, to be honest. And we had to redo a decent amount of them, but it still was in the market. And that's one thing I took from that time is, even if you, and this is a do as I say, not as I do kind of moment, but take your product and get it into market, get it something out there quickly, even charge people quickly, because until you know that like people are willing to pay for it and are willing to utilize it effectively, you're just not going to get the data to accurately give you those next steps in the product journey. And I think you can fake some of it with like design thinking sessions. We had probably 30 to 40 design thinking sessions at the beginning of the project, right? Just to kind of get a baseline for what people want in there. But until you get it out there and in the market and see that this product feature that we spent a week on developing is used by like 2% of the people, and in reality, they just want to do the core thing, right? It's just, you learn so much so quickly, and you're able to kind of get that product in the better place much quicker.
Gotcha. One of the interesting things about that I find in talking to, any type of business owner, and especially in, when it comes down to tech, is just, how did you overcome kind of like that ego aspect of, hey, we just spent a week working on this and only 2% used it.
Yeah. It sucks. There's not a good answer for that. Because I mean, my ego is basically shot at this point for how many mistakes I made in that product, man. It is very humbling, truly. Like you have to just say, like, I have assumptions, right? I have my baseline for what I think would work, and we have based on some data, right? Those design thinking sessions. But then after that, it's just, the market will choose the winners, right? The market will choose what's the best way to do things, and you can't be against market forces. You're never going to be smarter than the market, and unless you're Steve Jobs, who's basically says like, this is what you want, right? Like one dude and 8 billion people, right? That's not a thing that mere mortals can do. And I think it's just you just take your lumps along the way, learn to be flexible with it, own your mistakes, right? If you were the reason behind a product, hypothetically, charging the wrong side of the marketplace, which I did, you got to own that and say like, hey, this is on me. I know we spent this many resources on this, but it's for the better of the company and the product to go in this direction. And so I think as long as you have that transparency with your team and just own the mistakes you have, then it opens up the door for vulnerability for the rest of the team, so they can say, hey, I messed up on this thing too. Let's reroute to this way. And B, it's just, you just, not this heavy-handed, like it has to be right immediately, and then everybody's afraid to make a mistake, right? So those are the two kind of learnings I've taken from that part.
Gotcha. Now, as you kind of like, grown and developed, because one of the other interesting things is always like to think about like comparing when you started off, the problem that you were focused on solving versus now. So when you started off, what was kind of the problem that you were trying to solve for your prospective clients?
Yeah, totally true. So we actually went to market with the assumption that people would want to pay for an on-demand consultation with an attorney, right? Like, hey, you literally can ask them any question in the world, 15 minutes, $39, 30 minutes, $59, and then that's your lawyer that you can talk with about whatever for that time, right? And we would see everybody come through the funnel down till the paywall, and then they would all peace out. So it's literally 3% of people that went through after that. 97 was like, this is dumb. And the attorneys on the other side of that were like, hey, I mean, I like, the possibility of making $20 or $30 on, this time that I'm spending and giving good legal advice. But also what I truly want is just the potential for a lifelong client, right? I want to work with this person for the long term. And if that's going to be the barrier to entry for me to have these chats with them, that's not incentive enough, right? So we literally switched that whole model halfway through Techstars to say it's free for the users. And to be honest, that more aligns to our mission statement, which is to get people access to justice, right? Access to an attorney on demand, access to, if you don't have a Rolodex with an attorney in it, like this is an app you download and within 10 minutes, you're talking to one, right? And so on the attorney side, they will gladly pay us for a potential to have conversations with people that may turn into paying clients down the road. And so it just better aligned to that market dynamic. And we got it completely wrong at the beginning.
It's very interesting, like I said, to meet, someone that openly talks about like something like that humility in that process. Because one of the things that I find in talking with, law firms, like my firm, we provide accounting and CFO services for law firms. And one of the big challenges a lot of them face is, like, how do I get in front of people who are looking for what I do? Because I often find, there may be some legal practices that are a little different, but I often find it very similar to accounting, to where people are looking for you after the problem happens. And sometimes at that point, it's just like they're just trying to solve the problem. So they will talk to the very first person who gives them a call back. They're like, that's who I went with.
Yep. That's a great point. And that's all too real, is what's that ounce of prevention, pound of cure kind of thing. Like if you get in front of that and you're able to have that relationship with them on the front end, they trust you, they can, have that kind of baked in understanding versus calling the first random guy that may or may not be good at what they do, So I hear you.
It's one of those things, like I remember like old school talking to like some business owners where like it was a business owner that I met, and I forgot their name, their last name ended with like S or something like that. But like the name of their business was like, it started with an A, because they were like, you got to be in the front of the phone book.
Right.
It's like when people open the phone book, like they're probably never gonna make it back to the S's.
100%. That's it's a brilliant move. Yeah.
So it's very interesting to see, like I said, the landscape of, how lawyers can get in front of, clients, and then also making it accessible, because, you talked about your mission, and, I saw an article that was written about what you guys are doing of really giving people access to justice. So what's some of the feedback that people have had about, using the technology as you guys are moving towards that mission?
Yeah, no, thanks, man. Literally our mission statement is to enable access to 1 million people in all 50 states by 50,000 attorneys by 2025. Like that's our core mission statement. That's our North Star. That's what we will do. And, the cool thing about having it kind of baked into your mission statement with the numbers is you can actually walk back from that, right? You can say from your strategic mission, how many states do we have to be in? How many, users do we have to grow by to actually get that level of access to justice? And from the feedback we're getting, I mean, just from like a troubleshooting standpoint, when I've been helping some people, like these stories are just heartbreaking, honestly, some of them. You know, everything from domestic abuse to, just getting fired for being a black guy. Like that was one of our situations. And honestly, like we want to give people that access to how to have that attorney to have your back for that next conversation, and even if you don't ultimately go with them as your legal counsel, like it's still always empowering to have somebody to just talk you through the next steps, right? Like what should you be collecting as evidence against your abuser, right? Like what should you be doing to be safe? How do you keep your kids safe in that moment, right? And like it doesn't have to be all doom and gloom either. Like it's everything from, I want to cut down my neighbor's tree that's overhanging my yard, like what are my property rights to that, like what do I got to think about? So it's anything and everything that just is. And I'm sure you or listeners have always had that idea where like I have this legal question, but I just like I don't want to take the time to go through finding something at Google, do this thing, call my lawyer, whatever. This is that opportunity to just be in a better place with what those can resolve to be.
Mhm. Awesome. I think that's a great thing, because one of the things that I tell people a lot of times, like, from an accounting and finance, and even from a legal, like, you can probably Google and find an answer, but you don't necessarily know if that's the actual right answer. You probably, if you're looking for some specific guidance for your specific situation, you probably should talk to someone and have dialogue about your specific situation.
100%. Yep. And I don't want to overpromise, like the attorney can't solve a 6-month litigation, in a 15-minute phone call. But, to your point, like with that context, with that, them being in your jurisdiction, right? They're not some, random guy in California if you're in Iowa, right? So like it's somebody that's, there to help you and they know the law of your state and can walk you through truly just that next steps of how to think about your situation better.
Mhm. Awesome. I love it. I love it. So if people are interested in, checking out the solution, checking out the business, where can they find you guys online?
Yeah, thanks again. And it's legalq.io, legalq.io. Oh, beautiful. Love that. And from there, you can enter your info if you're a user looking for legal help for a free consultation. If you're an attorney, you can click that link in the top right for basically walkthrough of how the process works on the attorney side. And we'd love to have you be a part of LegalQ.
Awesome. Awesome. Now, one of the questions that I always love asking, every guest that comes on is, when you think about, the journey that you've been on, and you think about what you're building and the impact that you're making with your clients and in the market in general, what's 2 pieces of wisdom that you would share with other entrepreneurs? And then it could be something you've already said that you want to reiterate, or it could be 2 new things.
I love this question, Terrell. Thank you. I think so. I'll reiterate one and jump in with a new one. So I'm going to reiterate. It's a hard word. Basically, don't wait too long for getting your product out there. Get an MVP. You don't have to. You don't have to be perfect at the start, right? Like get something out there in the hands of people that are going to be your potential users. Get that feedback, incorporate it back in, and then over time, that product is going to get better and better so much quicker than you having this kind of waterfall, old school, way of approaching the development process, which, is just wasteful, to be honest. Stick to agile, be very user focused, and just get something out there. The second thing I would say is, so this going back to my time at Medtronic, right? And this kind of leads into your background in the show itself, right? So one of the beautiful things about working at a big company before you do the startup route is you get access to some value chain things that you just truly don't see in a startup for 5 to 10 years down the road, right? Like your order to cash, your procure to pay, just some of these really valuable insights as to how the operations of a business works through the finance, through the GL, through every different aspect of what that startup will need a little bit down the road. Because if you truly want to take it from that 0 to 1, that's great. But if you want to take it from 1 to X higher than that, like you're going to have some of those corporate chops to coincide with that. And I think that was just really valuable for me to be a part of that journey.
Awesome. I love it. I love it. Well, Zeb, thank you so much for being an amazing guest, and thank you for coming on the show today.
Thank you, Terrell. This was a lot of fun, and I really appreciate you. Thank you.
You just checked out the Law and Finance Show, where we bring you great, insightful interviews that talk about the business and the financial side of managing a law firm. So subscribe to the show and check out more of the great